Because at this time of year, you can't hide inside a sweater. It's the right beer now. Because you know what to do when good times are on the line. It's the right beer now. After working hard to take it off.
In December of 1988, a small group of citizens got together in Sacramento, California to plan a statewide initiative campaign to raise alcohol taxes. This effort expanded until thousands of California citizens became involved in the campaign. This is the story of that campaign. Ultimately, the campaign became a battle of public interests versus special interests, a battle of nurses, highway patrol officers, emergency physicians, the entire alcohol policy field versus the liquor industry from Puerto Rico, New York, Washington, D.C., Milwaukee, St. Louis, Modesto, and the wine region of Napa Valley. In October of 1989, I received a phone call from John DeLuca, the president of the Wine Institute. He was calling to talk us out of doing a tax initiative on alcohol. His proposal was a penny a drink. Our proposal was a nickel a drink. When I told him that we could not accept his proposal, he said something that I'll never forget. In an angry tone, he said, "We will call out the dogs of war." It was later when I understood what he meant. And what the industry had at its disposal was one of the nation's largest advertising machines. Hour after hour, and image after image after image. It drenches American culture in the benefits of alcohol. The industry has a network of wineries, breweries, distilleries, liquor stores, bars, restaurants, bottlers, distributors, all in place to fight any tax increase. California had the lowest alcohol taxes in the nation. The beer tax hadn't changed since Eisenhower was president, and the penny per gallon tax on wine hadn't changed since 1937. The nickel a drink tax proposal would have raised $750 million per year and earmarked the funds for the following: approximately $190 million for trauma care, $190 million for alcohol prevention programs and recovery services, $160 million for law enforcement, $110 million for community mental health programs, and $110 million for child abuse, domestic violence, and independent living programs. Support for earmarked alcohol taxes was growing nationwide.
I strongly recommend that states consider 5 cents a drink to be the minimum tax increase. After all, who could quarrel with a nickel a drink user fee that will generate billions of dollars to help save lives? The evidence strongly shows that an increase in price brought about by an increase in excise taxes prevents or delays underage youth from drinking and also reduces the amount that heavier drinkers consume.
Clean, fresh taste of Bud Light.
Well, I think to be successful, you have to have one principal advisor who's a Sacramento insider, someone who really understands and, you know, the realities of Sacramento politics, and that was Lloyd. I mean, we would not have been able to launch ourselves, nor would we have been as successful as we were without Lloyd Connolly. There's just no question about that. He was able to bring together, he had the stature and the presence to bring together the initial constituencies, and he had the kind of reputation that allowed the traditional political groups to commit to the campaign.
Well, the first thing that led up to alcohol tax or any one of these citizens' proposals is a failure of the legislative process. In this instance, California had an increased alcohol tax for years and years and years, one of, if not the lowest in the nation. Numerous attempts in the legislature to turn that around, all that were defeated because of the active opposition from the alcohol industry. So that's A. And out of that initial failing, there's anger, frustration that decent public policy isn't achieved, frustration with the process.
Many of us felt this frustration for years. For example, in the early 80s, when I served on the board of directors of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, We tried unsuccessfully to raise the alcohol taxes in the state legislature. The liquor industry killed us every time. However, we saw some hope in raising alcohol taxes when, in the 1988 elections in California, an initiative passed that raised the cigarette taxes 25 cents a pack. This effort was led by Lloyd Conley. So a month after the passage of the cigarette tax initiative, Lloyd brought together a small group to discuss doing an alcohol tax initiative in 1990. The organizations that were represented on the coalition included the California Council on Alcohol Problems, Alcohol Recovery Advocates, Prevention of Alcohol Problem Advocates, Environmentalists, California Chapter of the American College of Emergency Physicians, California Association of Highway Patrolmen, Mental Health Association, California Nurses Association, County Supervisors, Child Abuse Prevention Advocates, Family Violence Prevention Advocates, Disabled Rights Advocates, Consumers Union, Trauma Foundation, and others.
The most important decision is the drafting, and it's the formulation of the initial coalition. That's clear and away the most important decision. So it's also the first decision, and I don't think people always realize that the first decision is the most critical. Everything else is set. You know, once you've made those decisions, you are, you know, it's fixed. And you're making judgments 18 months in advance to the election on what the issues of that election will be. That's a very, very difficult, you know, guess.
To eliminate some of the guesswork involved in doing an initiative campaign, we conducted a poll of California voters in March of 1989. In the poll, we discovered that over 80% of the voters favored a nickel-a-drink tax on alcohol if the money was earmarked for alcohol-related programs. We also discovered that the liquor industry has no or little credibility with the voters. And finally, the voters of California recognize that there is a huge alcohol problem, and they want to solve that problem. Our coalition members who drafted the initiative worked in the trenches dealing with alcohol problems.
A little bit more. It doesn't take you long to show up to the scene of an accident where you have people just, you know, ground into hamburger, and you to go to many of those scenes of an accident and see the innocent people are the ones that are hurt.
That just this kind of protein alcohol destructive force that we find in our society. It's really amazing, and I didn't appreciate how many problems are out there and are a result of the condoned misuse of alcohol in our society. And we're all paying for this. That's the whole thing. We've all been sold a bill of goods by the liquor industry.
We made a significant financial contribution from our Political Action Committee account to this initiative, and it was a long shot for us because there wasn't any direct gain for nursing per se, but there was a significant potential gain for the clients we care for.
The writing of the initiative took 8 months and progressed through 27 drafts. We received expert comments from people from all over the country, as well as all of the coalition members in California. Our final draft called for a nickel-a-drink tax increase on alcohol to pay for alcohol-related programs. There was statewide coverage in the press when we submitted the initiative language to the state for approval. When the Los Angeles Times called the Wine Institute for their reaction, John DeLuca expanded on his dogs of war threat. "I'm going to defend to the death my glass of Chardonnay," said DeLuca. "This is going to be a jihad for us. This is going to be a holy war. We're going to raise whatever it takes." When we read that, we knew the campaign was on.
Clean, fresh taste of Bud Light. It won't fill you up, never lets you down.
The first step was to collect 1 million signatures in 150 days to qualify for the ballot. We hired Ken Masterton to train volunteers and to oversee paid signature gatherers. Ken also ran the signature drive for the cigarette tax initiative. During the signature gathering phase of the campaign, we raised and spent over $700,000. 1/3 of this was raised by emergency physicians.
So it was, there were different degrees of emphasis during the campaign. The initial period was we had to get the money to mount the initiative drive. That was the most difficult part of the campaign, was to, fund. I mean, we were spending $5,000 a day gathering signatures, and that was, frankly, for me, the most difficult part of the campaign.
This is the 10 o'clock news on Channel 2, the #1 primetime newscast in the country.
Today, the state of California put the numbers on the propositions many people will be voting on this November. And Proposition 134 could be one of the most expensive in state history. It'll be the nickel a drink tax initiative. Our business editor, Brian Bandmiller, is here now with the story. Brian.
Dennis and Elaine, more than 1 million Californians signed a petition putting a measure on the fall ballot that would tax the alcohol you drink and use the money to pay for specific alcohol-related social programs. And the alcohol industry sees the idea as the biggest threat to it since Prohibition.
The liquor industry's first step was to create a front organization called Taxpayers for Common Sense. They said that it was a coalition of farmers, small businesses, producers, and consumers. However, this coalition received over $20 million from Anheuser-Busch, Philip Morris, the makers of Miller, Coors, and other beer companies. Taxpayers for Common Sense was run by Rick Manter, who had recently run an anti-bottle deposit campaign in New Jersey. They also hired a San Francisco-based firm, PBN, to run their public relations campaign. And finally, they hired Nelson Ralston Robb, a media specialty firm, to create their TV and radio ads. After putting together their campaign team, their first accomplishments were to place 2 other initiatives on the ballot. Proposition 126 would have raised taxes a penny a drink. Proposition 136 would have voided our nickel a drink initiative. Lenny Goldberg ran the campaign against 136.
So it was designed to overturn the alcohol tax, 134, not 126, because it had separate language that exempted itself from that. But 134, it also probably would have voided other tax measures on the same ballot. So in that sense, we called it a poison pill or a ballot virus, which got a lot of play in the press.
It's the right beer now.
There was no guarantee for us that the alcohol tax initiative was going to be considered one of the major measures on the ballot. In fact, there was some concern that it would be completely overshadowed by the environmental initiatives. And so the liquor industry made the issue controversial because they started the earliest blitz of media against an initiative in state history. They waited until the primary was over, and then within weeks were on the air.
They're on the air with a very sophisticated, very broad array of radio spots, nicely produced to coincide with the programming of the stations.
I tell you, it's not a great year to be a farmer. We've got a full-blown drought, taxes are killing us, we've got medflies, and now comes this crazy thing they call the alcohol tax proposition.
And that increased cost would come from cutting important programs like those for our elderly, and other critical programs like fire protection and public transportation, or from increasing taxes. Either way, it would hurt a lot of people.
Working on your budget, are you, Maggie?
Oh, why did I ever marry a farmer? Boy, is it tough making ends meet this year.
Well, wait till you read this alcohol tax proposition.
Oh, I've heard about it.
They call it an alcohol tax, but in fact, it's a tax on everyone.
So, we got this alcohol tax proposition, right, Marty? Yeah, Bill, that's what they call it, an alcohol tax proposition. And it would cost millions of dollars more than it would raise. Are you kidding? Hundreds of millions more. Hundreds of millions? Yep. Wow. And that money would come from increasing our taxes? Like income tax or sales tax. Or from cutting critical programs. Yeah, cutting programs like fire prevention and care for the needy. Well, either way, a lot of people would get hurt. Boy, you can say that again. And the money would go to the pet projects of the promoters? That's correct. You know, Marty? What? You just can't beat Yankee ingenuity. Yeah, but how about their pitching?
For a free copy of the proposition, call 1-800-464-READ. Read the small print. You'll see it's not what it claims.
In addition to these radio ads that were broadcast on more than 120 radio stations, the liquor industry placed half-page ads in the state's largest newspapers, portraying Prop 134 as a wolf in sheep's clothing. They placed no on 134 posters in the windows of bars, restaurants, and liquor stores throughout the state. They placed no on 134 table tents on the tables in bars and restaurants. They mounted a direct mail campaign against 134, and they sent this free 9-minute videotape to anyone who called their 800 number.
Let's begin by taking a close look at 134. A clause in the proposition mandates annual increases based on population growth and inflation. It could take millions from programs like care for the elderly, victims of crime, fire protection, and transportation.
Well, another thing that disturbs me about Proposition 134 is that it only allocates 3% of its revenues to enforcing drunk driving laws.
These children and 4 million others in California are being ignored by this initiative. Now, this initiative might have some good intentions, but the fact of the matter is that not one red cent from this initiative is going to be used to educate children and youth regarding the dangers of alcohol and drug abuse.
If this tax passes, you'll see some growers going out of business, the family farm grower. Or it'll affect our employees, the people who work with us to do this job.
See you at the polls November 6th.
And then the liquor industry rolled out their TV commercials.
Major funding from the Beer Institute and Industry, Wine Institute, and Distilled Spirits Council.
If Proposition 134 passed, the people of California would have to give the proposition promoters hundreds of millions of our tax dollars every year, like sales taxes or income taxes. And even if their programs didn't work, we would have to give them more of our tax money every year. Every year, forever. Read Proposition 134 yourself. It's not what it claims.
Major funding from the Beer Institute.
I just read the small print in this strange proposition. I learned that it could take away hundreds of millions of our tax dollars from programs like fire protection and public transportation and caring for the aged, year after year, forever. Read it yourself. It's not what it claims.
Major funding from the Beer Institute.
I think they're trying to stampede me with this Proposition 134. They're asking for a blank check. No expiration date, no budget review, yearly increases. Do they actually think I'm going to buy into a program that takes in $700 million in new taxes but locks in spending of $2 billion? Who do they think's going to make up the difference? Not this taxpayer.
Major funding from the alcohol beverage industry and the beer industry.
The liquor industry used its massive budget and advertising machine very effectively to plant the seeds of doubt in the minds of California voters. They did weekly polling and focus groups to help them identify the buzzwords and the images that scared the voters the most. When a lie is repeated often enough, it can seem like a nickel tax increase on a bottle of beer is going to lead to the wholesale destruction of California.
Major funding from the Beer Institute.
Figure this. Proposition 134 raises $700 million a year, but because it locks in some pet programs, it requires spending about $2 billion. I make that about $1.3 billion short. Now, guess whose taxes will make up the difference? That's right, yours and mine.
Because we had attempted to avoid the trap that the lottery had fallen into in California. The lottery was destined to provide money to public schools. The public perception, quite accurately, is that in fact the lottery has meant nothing to the public schools because while it puts the money into the schools, it didn't prevent the legislature from taking money out the other side in terms of their dedicated support. We attempted to get around that by mandating a floor level of government support with the nickel a drink tax as the add-on for these various programs so that there wouldn't be the ability of the politicians to take the money away. This was attacked by the alcohol industry as an escalator clause which supposedly would go up and up ad infinitum, and the spot which they had, which did it beautifully, very entertaining spot, is a woman standing on an escalator talking about the escalator clause.
Escalators are usually free,
But the escalator clause in Proposition 134 makes its costs go up automatically, hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And you and I pay that cost with our sales and income taxes. And the Proposition 134 escalator could send our taxes higher every year, forever.
The biggest lie of the campaign was the commercial that the California Teachers Association did for the liquor industry. Proposition 134 was going to give $45 million every year for prevention programs in the community, in the media, and in the schools. The children of California really lost out when their Teachers Association cut a political deal with the liquor industry.
Wine Institute, and Distilled Spirits Council.
If we ever stop alcohol abuse, we'll do it here with our kids. And that's what's so terribly upsetting about Proposition 134. Of all the hundreds of millions of dollars it costs California taxpayers, not 1 red cent goes to schools where it's needed most. The California Teachers Association urges you to vote 134 no.
Major funding from the Beer Institute and industry.
At first, I thought Proposition 134 was a great idea. And why not? It promised more than $100 million to law enforcement. But I'm trained to examine the evidence, so I read the small print. And it turns out that most of that money can be given to people who have nothing to do with law enforcement.
Major funding from the alcohol beverage industry and the Beer Institute.
The California Council of Police and Sheriffs urge you to vote 134 no.
I mean, we had every major law enforcement group in this state who endorsed us. And they can undo much of that by finding a single dissident group. And they may not represent, in this instance, they represented very few sworn officers. But it's enough for them to say, you know, law enforcement's not uniform in its support.
Any police officer who would come out and oppose Prop 134 would speak on behalf of the liquor industry, very probably is a disgrace to the badge he wears.
Stereo. Coffee, KOFY, Stereo TV 20, San Francisco.
An estimated $30 million will be spent to convince voters not to swallow a nickel a drink shot of taxes.
There were several things they did that were questionable. But where I think it was the all-out effort was the finances. I mean, I think they were going to spend an incredible amount of money and just they were going to do to the alcohol, to the proponents of the tax increase, what we did to Iraq. I mean, they were just going to put as much firepower in there against to wipe out a little army.
Slow you down. The silver bullet.
The underlying concept here is very simple, that the airwaves are not the possession of anybody who can afford them, whether it be Anheuser-Busch or Aetna Insurance or whoever. They're the public. They belong to all of us, and when they're used in that fashion, there ought to be some equalizing of public access.
What Lloyd described was the Federal Trade Commission's fairness doctrine, which we invoked so that we could procure free time or fairness time to run our spots on TV and radio. We had no money to purchase time.
We solicited 147 radio stations for airtime to respond to industry ads. 87 of the 147 responded affirmatively.
I've had a lot of drunk drivers try to lie to me over the years, but none of them ever lied as much as the liquor industry has about Proposition 134. For instance, they're spending millions of dollars to make you think law enforcement opposes Prop 134. That's a lie. Major statewide groups from the Police Chiefs Association and California Peace Officers Association to the California Association of Highway Patrolmen support Prop 134. We need that nickel a drink to help stop drunk drivers and maybe save your life.
Major funding by emergency physicians and nonprofit health corp. In television, there were 42 stations that were on the alcohol industry buy. We got 32 of those to provide us airtime. And ratios almost uniformly were 1-3 or 1-4, well within the normal fairness doctrine response level.
No matter how tragic or comic a play may be, it ends when the final curtain falls. But in real life, the tragedies don't end so easily. children who are battered and abused, accident victims dying for lack of emergency care. You and I can write a happier ending by voting yes on Proposition 134, raising a nickel a drink to stop these tragedies. Please, a nickel a drink is so little. A young life is so much.
Major funding by emergency physicians and nonprofit health.
We elected to go with celebrity appeals and attempt to use those in a way that would get the message through to the public. We felt that we had a soft message that had strong public support in any case, and the only thing we needed was people to look at the TV set. We weren't out to change their minds. We were out only to keep their minds where they were.
I think laws should make sense. And my idea of a sensible law is Proposition 134, raising a nickel a drink to pay for alcohol problems, to stop drunk drivers, to keep emergency rooms open for victims, to help keep kids off alcohol and drugs. Then there's Proposition 126, only a penny a drink, handed over directly to the politicians. 126 backed by the liquor industry. 134 with major funding by emergency physicians and nonprofit health corporations. Yes on 134.
We probably wound up right in the neighborhood of about $1.9 to $2.1 million in time. We've been getting affidavits in, they've been coming in late. Best estimate I can make is somewhere in that 1.9 to 2.1 range. That's combined radio and TV.
In addition to running the largest fairness campaign in California history, we were also extensively covered in the media. This included meetings with editorial boards, press conferences, protest marches and demonstrations, radio talk shows, debates with industry, TV appearances, interviews, and political cartoons depicting John DeLuca's liquor lobby.
Good times roll with the clean, fresh taste of Bud Light.
10 days before the vote, Prop 134 was ahead in the polls, 53% to 39%. However, during the last 10 days, support fell dramatically, and 134 lost, receiving only 31% of the vote.
I think the big factor in the defeat was the large number of initiatives that were on the ballot. And I don't know if you've got any videotape of what the ballot books look like, but the people in other states ought to know what we face here. This is what was sent to every voter in the state, 222 pages. And these are big pages here with fine print that we have here in italics. And so that, you know, the research that was done afterwards determined that people at the last minute just were turned off. They rebelled against this. And I think in just the last few days, a lot of people just voted no on everything.
Many shared Harvey Chin's views that the public was fed up with the process, that had become too complex, thanks in large part to the liquor industry.
Totally beyond our control, and that was the number of measures on the ballot. And people, as you know, just got angry and confused and frustrated, and honest to God sentiment of voting no on everything, or voting no except on those things you understood absolutely, totally, and completely developed. And that has never really happened in California before. I mean, this was a first one.
Taken on our own, our measure, going before the voters, one-on-one against the alcohol industry, we would have won. I have no doubt in the world of it, regardless of the results. I think we win that one straight up if we're the only measure out there. But I think the combination of an effective alcohol industry campaign that had dampened us down and a public revolt against the whole depth and complexity of the ballot was enough to take us out of it.
I think a lot of it had to do with things out of your control, and I think overriding all is that whenever the stars aren't lined up right, the money's going to win.
The good times roll with the clean, fresh taste of Bud Light. It won't fill you up, never lets you down.
Although the nickel a drink initiative was demolished in the November 6th vote, it created the political possibility that alcohol taxes could be raised in the legislature. 10 days after the vote, legislators were calling for a tax increase on alcohol, which was enacted and took effect July 15, 1991. The legislature raised wine taxes for the first time in 54 years. Another outcome of the 134 campaign was the massive amount of media attention given to alcohol problems. Also, for the thousands of people who worked on the campaign, they encountered the industry's dogs of war and emerged politically more sophisticated and prepared to take on the industry in the next campaign.
Step right up, son, and try this new beer, but are you over 21? Yes, I am, mister, so please pass the bottle, cause I've been drinking ever since I could swallow. Okay, one of these are St. Ives, we took off the stickers. If you were blindfolded, do you think you could pick it? The other brand's alright, that may be true, G, but y'all can't fool me, cause I know the S-T-I-D-E-S has gotta be the best. Well, put this blindfold on and take the test. It's greater than alphabeta, so I gotta tell a friend. Yo, Pooh, show him what he win.
The good times roll with the clean, fresh taste of Bud Light. It won't fill you up, never lets you down. The good times roll with the clean, fresh taste of Bud Light. It won't fill you up, never lets you down.